Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. It's actually pretty fascinating to look at the global economy as this massive, incredibly intricate machine. Think about it. You've got national economies, international trade routes, literally billions of transactions happening every single second. And to keep a machine that incredibly complex from just completely breaking down, the world relies on this very specific, kind of invisible scaffolding. It's basically a massive global toolbox. And today we're going to take a look right at that scaffolding together.
Which brings us to a really massive, provocative question. Who actually governs the global economy? When a huge financial crisis hits, or a developing country wants to build a brand new nationwide railway, or a nasty trade dispute threatens to just halt commerce entirely, who exactly is holding the wrenches? Who has the actual authority and the capital to step in and fix the machine?
Okay, let's dive right into this alphabet soup of international organizations. We'll start with the global economic scaffolding, then examine the big three institutions, look at the rise of regional banks, explore India's role in global governance, and finally, check out the cracks in the system.
Starting off with Section 1, the global economic scaffolding. To really understand the tools we use today, we kind of have to look back at the workshop where they were built. The modern global economic order as we know it was constructed way back in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. That's what gave us the IMF and the World Bank. But of course, the system kept evolving, right? We see the Asian Development Bank pop up in 1966, trade governance gets officially formalized with the WTO in 1995, and that brings us all the way up to a whole new era of massive infrastructure financing with the AIIB in 2016.
Moving right along to Section 2, the big three institutions.
So, these are our heavy-duty power tools. First up, we've got the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The best way to think of them is as the world's financial firefighter. When a severe balance of payments crisis hits a country, the IMF steps in as the absolute lender of last resort. We saw this kind of crucial break glass in case of emergency intervention during the Asian financial crisis and the Greek debt crisis. Basically, they provide the emergency cash needed to prevent a complete economic collapse and stop that financial panic from spilling over borders.
Next, we have the World Bank Group. Now, if the IMF is the firefighter rushing in to put out the immediate blaze, the World Bank is the construction crew coming in afterward to rebuild the whole neighborhood. Their mission is totally different. They're heavily focused on long-term capacity building. They finance these massive physical, human development projects in developing nations. We're talking roads, power grids, water supply systems, and huge public healthcare initiatives.
People actually mix these two up all the time, mostly because they share those same Bretton Woods origins. But here's a really handy rule of thumb to keep them straight. On side A, the IMF is your short-term macroeconomic stabilizer. On side B, the World Bank is your long-term capacity builder. Basically, it's short-term crisis management versus long-term development finance.
And the third major member of our big three is the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. Established in 1995, it's essentially the global trade court referee. While the IMF and World Bank deal heavily in money and finance, the WTO deals strictly in rules. Its entire job is to reduce trade barriers, promote free trade, and act as an international legal forum to settle heated arguments over things like agricultural subsidies or import tariffs.
The WTO tries to create a fair, predictable trading system using two really foundational principles. First up is the most favored nation rule. This basically means if you lower a tariff and offer a sweet trade deal to one specific country, you generally have to offer that exact same benefit to all other WTO members. No playing favorites. Second is national treatment. This means once a foreign product legally crosses your border and enters your local market, you have to treat it exactly the same as a domestically produced good. Together, these two rules are meant to totally level the global playing field.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating is the sheer scale of the global economy when we cooperate outside of those formal institutions too. Just look at this massive number right here, 85%. That is the percentage of total global GDP represented by the G20 alone. Alongside the formal institutions, cooperation forums like the G20, which includes 19 major economies plus the EU and the African Union, they coordinate massive, sweeping global policies on inflation, climate finance, and debt management. It really puts into perspective just how centralized global economic power truly is.
All right, let's look at Section 3, Rise of Regional Banks.
So the world order is shifting, right? And because of that, new, highly specialized tools are entering the global toolbox. Take a look at how regional development banks are evolving to fit this new reality. On the left, we've got the Asian Development Bank, established in 1966 in Manila. They focus really broadly on sustainable development and poverty reduction across the Asia-Pacific. But then on the right, we have the much newer Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, established in 2016 and headquartered in Beijing. The AIIB emerged to aggressively target the massive, totally unmet need for physical and green infrastructure financing across Asia and even beyond.
And, the AIIB isn't alone here. We also have the New Development Bank, or the NDB, which was established by the BRICS nations. Why does this actually matter? Well, because emerging economies are deliberately creating these alternative governance structures, provide new sources of financing. It's a very direct response to a growing desire to increase representation for developing countries and, importantly, to reduce dependence on those traditional Western-dominated institutions we were just talking about.
Which brings us to Section 4, India in Global Governance. To ground all these abstract concepts in some reality, let's look at a prime example, India. It's super interesting because India is actually a founding member of almost all these institutions we've covered: the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB, the AIIB, and the WTO. And you can see the tangible physical benefits of this on the ground. Through these tools, India has secured vital financing for smart cities, massive urban transport systems, and highly ambitious renewable energy projects. And on the trade side, the WTO framework has been absolutely crucial for expanding India's massive exports in sectors like IT services and pharmaceuticals.
But the thing is, India isn't just a beneficiary of these systems, it's stepping up as a leader. As the source material explicitly highlights, India consistently advocates for greater representation of developing countries and supports reforms that reflect contemporary economic realities. As one of the world's largest and fastest-growing economies, India has evolved into a highly powerful voice advocating for the Global South. They are pushing hard to reform these global financial institutions so they accurately reflect the world as it is today, not the world as it was back in 1944.
Finally, let's check out Section 5, Cracks in the System. Now, any machine, no matter how incredibly well-built it is, requires an honest inspection from time to time. And right now, the global economic scaffolding is facing some very serious systemic criticisms. First up is the democratic deficit. Because voting rights in institutions like the IMF and World Bank largely depend on financial contributions, wealthy Western nations hold disproportionate voting power. Second, we have sovereignty concerns. A lot of governments argue that externally imposed loan conditions basically intrude on their domestic policymaking. And finally, the social consequences of austerity measures. Critics strongly argue that mandating cuts to government subsidies and public spending can deeply worsen inequality, though supporters of the system counter that these tough reforms are absolutely necessary to restore long-term economic stability.
And compounding all those traditional criticisms are entirely new 21st century realities. Let's be honest, these post-World War II organizations were just not originally designed to handle the challenges we're seeing right now. They are being forced to adapt on the fly to climate change, the severe economic fallout of global pandemics, digital trade, data governance, the rapid, explosive rise of artificial intelligence, and crushing burdens of rising sovereign debt. The mandate for these organizations has expanded massively.
So, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've seen exactly how this incredible global scaffolding was built, we know how it operates, and we've seen the critical role it plays in keeping our modern world connected and funded. But, as entirely new, unprecedented crises emerge at breakneck speed, can these 20th century institutions evolve fast enough to survive the 21st century? Or is it time to build a new toolbox entirely? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this helped you see the invisible architecture of our world just a little bit clearer.